Hello, good evening, welcome. I am Samuel Trapp. This is Damn Radio, and my show is called International Flavor. Very glad you're here tonight. Very glad you're listening. Very glad that my aim was true and I was able to figure out how to get the connection set up just right in time. It disappeared right before the test came. Anyway, nobody needs to hear any of that. It's been an exciting weekend. There was quite a bit going on, quite a bit to talk about, some interesting things. If you'd like to join the program today, please feel free to dial in at the old number 4, the Lake Ozark Real Estate state-of-the-art studio. Right? Damn Radio, real state-of-the-art studio. I'm not sure I have that right. I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm too wrong. But you know what? I'm not really sweating it all that much, to be truthful, because it's a really cool place no matter how you slice it, no matter what you call it. We are here, and you, on the other hand, are not. But you're with us in spirit, in the studio, watching what's going on in the world. And while we discuss, you are actually doing important things, listening to us on the radio at the same time, and we enjoy that. So we're very glad you're here. Lots going on, but as usual, I am a bit mired down. We had some, because I want to discuss with you. So as I was predicting last week, and ultimately was correct in what I was predicting, instead of trying to work with something that the Russians could come up with, and acknowledging that the war in Ukraine is over, which it is. Russia is, it should be over. Russia has won, basically. They have driven the Ukrainians out of about probably 85, 90, 95. So it depends on who you talk to, what they're saying, of the Kursk region, which was really quite foolish in the first place. And it turns out that the trepidation I had about the discussions about Rubio, about the stretching of the truth, and about taking this unfortunate war, which for at least the last year, while campaigning, Trump could have, should have, did often call it Joe Biden's war. The sad truth is, if you don't play this just right, this is going to become his war. And I'm afraid that's what appears to be happening because of the way it's been approached. And so he's going to be the one saddled. There's been a lot of, and I wish I'd listened to JR's show today. Sadly, I could not, because sometimes he delves into these things and has some news from sources that I don't listen to. And it's interesting to hear his perspective on some of them when they come out, especially on the international side of the fence. And I did all of my research yesterday. Today I've been busting my hump doing some other things, and everything I've looked at is a good 10 hours old. So apologize for that, but that's sometimes the way it goes, and we'll keep track of what's new and interesting. But I wanted to get some things. So Rubio was being interviewed when he came out of some meeting that he was having over in what was it, Ireland? He was over on the British Isles somewhere, and he gave a little bit of a press conference. And of course, everybody's very interested in what's going on because there's so much death and destruction and so much wrong that is going on. But as I said before, they're very eager to try to think that they're going to try to force Vladimir Putin into doing something, and I truthfully don't believe that is going to occur. I suppose it's possible, but suppose you have to bluff all the way until it's time to lay down your hand and see what sort of hand you've been dealt. The bluffing is all on our side of the fence because I don't think that we have any. So people always say, you can only play a bluff so far, but if you're holding all the cards, you're not bluffing. You're playing your cards. Ours are all a bluff, and I believe um, Trump pointed that out to the Zelensky monster. Trump pointed that out in that debacle that was held in the Oval Office 10, 15, 14 days ago, 16, something like that. Wasn't that long ago when he was forcing it, and when he was sitting high at the time. I did 2 longer programs yesterday in Russian and spoke to by text or by comments on my programs in Russian. We're speaking with other people that saying some of the things that I'm going to relate to here. And the sad truth is that Russia is holding all of the cards. Sad truth for Ukraine, that is. Sad truth for America, that is. But no one can question that this war has gone, at least for the last year, all Russia's way. Now, they've lost a significant number of people, and Ukrainians lost a devastating number of people and some territories and some property and some personal property. And we send some people over to Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, to meet with a team appointed by Zelensky to hopefully force them to come to the table. Now, as I said prior to that meeting, this is going to mean that you've got to come up with something that Russia is willing to listen to, and that a ceasefire is just a plain old ceasefire is going to have to be based on something else. And then now we've waited. This was last Monday. It's been a full week for us to hear what Russia's reaction has been. And so far, Russia's reaction has been nothing. We're calling the bluff. They have said, exactly what any of us who know what the hell is going on, exactly what we expected them to say. And that is, okay, well, what about our concerns? What about these people in Kursk region? You expect us to just, I don't know what, let them go? Let them retreat? We claim that these people have killed civilians in their basements, in their homes. We've read you letters about what's going on in Kursk, that diaries that people have left. And we've read these to you, and we believe that war crimes are being committed, and we believe that a lot of these are not Ukrainians. I read all kinds of reports this weekend that it's more than 2/3 is what they are saying. The people that are trapped in Kursk are people from the West, from Poland, from America, from Colombia, the country. There's been a lot of discussion about what languages you hear on the radio over there in the Kursk region. And none of this is reported on in America. But on the other side of the world and on all the Telegram channels, they're reporting it and they're talking about it. And they're when they're interviewing people, they're saying, well, the languages they're speaking over there in Kursk, especially in Kursk, are, Polish and English, French. That's what they're speaking. And they're not speaking Ukrainian. And so they don't want to let these surrounded troops depart. And I think people are missing that. And then Rubio comes out with this interview that he did the other day. And I want to play it for you. I'm going to stop it pretty frequently. Now, it's a little bit involved, and it's 18 minutes long, but I'm going to let it go, and then we will take a minute, take a break, and discuss at the points that I think we need to, on the points that I think we need to hear, or that I have a comment on, because things where I think he's made a mistake. I shall let you know.
In their response officially, and are they willing to accept the ceasefire unconditionally? In their response officially, and
He's
are they
basically
willing to
asking
accept
if
the ceasefire unconditionally?
Russia's what they're going to say about
Well,
ceasefire.
we don't know the answer to the last question. That's what we want to know, whether they're prepared to do it unconditionally. We'll have contact with them today. There's already been contacts at different levels with counterparts, different members of the administration, and that'll continue. But as far as the Russian reaction to it, that's really the question here. And that is, this was a few hours old. We're going to bring it to them directly. We're going to say that Ukraine is prepared to stop all battlefield activity and begin the immediate process of negotiating an enduring end to the war. And we'll see what their response is. If their response is yes, then we know we've made real progress and there's a real chance of peace. If their response is no, it would be highly unfortunate and it would make their intentions clear. So that's what we're hoping to hear from them. And obviously, as I said, this was not prearranged for them. So they're probably processing the news the same as the rest of the world is. So we hope to have a positive answer from them. The ball is truly in their court. It's really
the key phrase in there was when he said, "This will make their intentions clear." Well, their intentions have been clear for a very long time. What this will mean is, and they have always said, you come to us with a temporary ceasefire, some way to just stop on the ground. We stop right now without talking about the need to end this war completely. Do not come to us with that. Come to us with something that says we will resolve the whole thing. We aren't just going to take a break so that you can rearm Ukraine and change the momentum on the battlefield, which is definitely in our favor. Now, anybody that, plays football, you don't take a timeout when you got the momentum, when things are going your way. The other team takes a timeout to stop you, to stop your momentum. It's true in hockey, it's true in basketball, it's true in football, any of those momentum types of sports. It takes a little while to pick up steam again, and you have especially if you're going to say for 30 days, and you have no guarantee at the end. And you have a big fat nothing burger for what you've said. All it is, and here's Rubio now saying, well, we just want him to stop and come to the table. Everybody stop. Let's come to the table and start talking. Well, why can't we come to the table right now? Russia's been offering that for a long time. Why do you need a ceasefire to start negotiating? Whoever said that was a requirement? I mean, seriously. And sure, I want this fighting to cease. I want the dying on both sides to stop. But and maybe I'm the nut here. Maybe I'm the lunatic for thinking that this is not how things are resolved. But the Russians don't trust us any more than we trust them. Why would they? Frankly, nothing that anybody ever says it comes to pass if you're on the Russian side of the planet. Nothing. And I mean, seriously, think about it. Has anything Russia has ever agreed to come to pass on our side? And by the way, nothing ever comes to pass internationally on the American side either. And there's no discussion about having the war basically stopped on the Ukrainian side. The Ukrainians didn't want to stop at all. Remember that. They didn't want to stop. I think it's rather foolishly. I don't think it's true at all. But I think they believe that they still have the ability to win this war. But they don't. And he'll get further when he gets into here. He's going to talk a little bit about peacekeepers, but that's just question number one. And he says, and he wants to let everybody know that the Russians' intentions will be clear if they don't agree to a 30-day ceasefire with zero conditions. Everybody just stops. Then what? This is your proposal, allegedly.
Secretary, Nike Chin with the Voice of America. What would be a good G7 joint statement on Russia and on China?
Well, I think the perfect statement would be that the United States has done a good thing for the world in bringing this process forward, and now we all eagerly await the Russian response and urge them strongly to consider ending all hostilities so people will stop dying, so bullets will stop flying, and so a process can begin to find a permanent peace. I think the first step in all this is the acceptance that there is no military solution to this conflict. Neither side can militarily achieve their maximalist gains, their maximalist goals. Neither side can achieve them through the military side. The only way this conflict can end is through negotiation. That's the only way you're going to have peace, is through negotiation. And so we need to start that process. And it is hard to start a process when people are shooting at each other and people are dying. And so our hope is that we can stop that, all these hostilities, and get to a negotiating table where both sides, over some period of time with a lot of hard work, can find a mutually acceptable outcome that, in the case of Ukraine, obviously secures their long-term prosperity and security.
Mr. Secretary.
Well, I object again, Your Honor. I believe that this is a mistake as well, that this war could be won on the battlefield and would be won on the battlefield if the U.S. wasn't supplying the bullets, if the U.S. wasn't supplying the rockets that are, going here and there, if the U.S. wasn't defending a democracy that doesn't exist, if the Europeans weren't claiming, that, oh, gee, Russia wants to take over all of Europe. All of these foolish things that people have been talking about just become more and more clear as you look through this, because there is no way that Ukraine could ever have won this war if it wasn't for the arms, the weapons, the training, the backing, the everything of the United States and the Biden administration. And here's where I first got the thought that when I was listening to this, when I yesterday or this morning, well, it was yesterday actually, and that I was listening to this, is that that old Trumpster is turning this war into his own. He had it made. He had it all correct. In my humble opinion, and I don't ever claim to be smarter than Donald Trump. I ain't smarter than a lot of people. But I understand how this part is going to work out, and it's not going to go the way that thinks it is, and there's a danger that it gets astronomically worse, and that is entirely possible, because now the U.S. is bluffing. The U.S. has no intention of getting into this battle, but the U.S. will, the first time that Donald Trump increases and gives something more to the Russian side, or to the Ukrainian side, to go after Russia, it becomes his war. Now Biden, God love him, poor guy, he for the most part played it right, and the Europeans were playing it right when they were denying Ukraine the ability to use Western weapons, Western rockets, to fire anywhere other, or inside of Russia, into Russia. Now, disputed territories where there's armed combat going on at the same time, okay, that was always allowed in the Storm Shadows, the HIMARS, the ATACMS that the U.S. supplied and the European allies supplied. Those were never allowed to fire into Russia until the last quarter of last year. right at the end of the Biden administration. And he stopped everyone else from allowing that to occur. And then as soon as they did that, they went from Ukraine's war. I mean, it was always Ukraine's war, but it went from them to adding on. And every time we turn around, they're upping the ante and making it worse. That's what's happening. So now they allowed what have the Russians got to lose? Seriously, what do they have to lose? Sanctions not being taken away? Who gives a schmike? Who cares? Who gives a crap? If they take the sanctions away or not. Yep, they're hurting the Russian economy, but they're hurting the rest of the European economy worse. Okay, and the Russian economy. There was a time when the ruble was going up. Well, now it's back down again. The ruble, I was checking it out the other day. It's 85, and when I was there last August, it was it was 90, 91. When I went in October, it was 93, something like that. And it was at least a year ago that it was at the 80 something. And so the Russian economy is actually chugging right along. 4% growth last year, expected again this year. They're growing faster than we are. Their economy is cooking with gas. You have nothing to complain about. And so what are they offering Russia? So far, the fat nothing burger that Rubio is talking about is, well, we have to get to the table. We have to talk. Well, why can't you do that now? Who's stopping you from doing it now? The Russians had a legitimate beef that every time we stop, all you do is rearm, and then we start back up again because you don't live. If we're not going to agree anyway, if all you're offering us is a nothing burger, what makes us think that there's going to be any meat between a couple of slabs of bread, possibly with some cheese on top, for us during a negotiation? What do we care? You're not offering us anything now. When are you going to offer us something? They don't get offered anything. All they get is, well, we're going to sanction you. Oh, yeah, well, okay. You are sanctioning us. What are you going to do? Sanction us more? That's what they're already doing that. And every time the Russians look inward, and what do? They build their own economy. They trade with their дружеские партнеры, our friendly partners. That's who they trade with. They trade with the people that are nearby. They trade with India. They trade with China. And by the way, those things are going quite well. And the U.S. is damaging itself with these sanctions because it just forces more and more and more to go through India and China. And then when they do, these partnerships are building. And what are they doing? They're not using the dollar. So their internal currencies, all three of them, are stronger than they've been in a long time. And they keep missing this point over and over and over, that this war interrelates to a lot of things. But if all you're going to do is offer sanctions, nobody bets. The bet is not that the U.S. will be on the ground in there. We get later in this, we get to the peacekeepers alleged. I'll quit talking. We'll listen to Rubio some more. But important points he's putting out. But wanted to hear you straight from the horse's mouth how nothing burger this really is.
Could you just update us on Mr. Witkoff's plans for Moscow and whether he'll be meeting with President Putin? And then separately, if you wouldn't mind elaborating on something that Mr. Walt said yesterday about the specifics that you discussed with Ukrainians about what the end of the war would look like. You had mentioned we're not going to get maps out and draw lines, but did you actually talk about territorial concessions?
Well, we had conversations. As far as Steve's trip, I'm not here to, I'm not going to make any announcements about specific dates, times, or even confirm such a trip. Suffice it to say there's going to be multiple points of contact with the Russians to gauge are they willing to do this or not. And as far as the conversations that were yesterday, yeah, when you sit down with a counterpart like Ukraine, we're not going to negotiate this publicly. We're not going to actually put out there sort of what we talked about, because in any negotiation there's certainly an element where you don't want one side to be giving away all this leverage from a public perspective. We had a broad conversation about what it would, but I think the bulk of our conversation was what a negotiation process would look like in terms of not the specific conditions, but rather the timing of it, sort of the steps they would like to see taken. The Ukrainians made very clear that this isn't just about ending a war. They need to get their prisoners of war back. They need to get the children back. They'd like to see.
There he is about the children again, and that is an interesting point, and we elaborated a little bit on that on Friday. And this children thing is just another bit of a nothing burger. The Russians have been trying to work that out with their counterparts and discussed that in detail. Quite a few articles about that, on how they've been trying to resolve that with the Ukrainians, who just abandoned these kids and left them sitting there. And the Russians took them into care at that time.
In exchange of prisoners of war, they'd like to see their children back. So there's all sorts of things tied to the humanitarian assistance is important as well. There are areas of Ukraine that have been badly damaged that require immediate assistance. So these are the sorts of things that we talked about as being inclusive in the negotiation process. So really the bulk of our conversation when we got to that stage of it was discussing the kinds of items that need to be on a negotiation agenda, even when we hopefully get there.
He also mentioned security guarantees, which is something that there has been some reluctance for the administration to elaborate on. Are you committing to security
Well, I
guarantees?
think the point to understand is that we're looking at is securing their long-term, what we want to see, like any country in the world, Ukraine wants their long-term security. They want to make sure that this doesn't happen again. We all do. What is the point of spending all this time to get a ceasefire, hopefully, and then a negotiated end of the war, only to see it re-spark up again in about 6 years, 4 years, 3 years?
Now that is a good point, and we wonder why it isn't the primary target of this. And again, there's nothing he's said here that has made it clear that Russia isn't, that Ukraine is blameless, okay? You keep saying Ukraine needs security guarantees. Well, Russia's been talking about security for 30 years. They've been talking about it for the last 10 since Maidan, 11 since Maidan. That anniversary just came up a little bit ago. They've been talking about security and talking about you can't put NATO in here and talking about all those things. And everybody just ignores them. Again, what do they have to lose if all you're going to do is ignore them?
3 years. We're not interested in that, and they certainly aren't either. So I think the question really is more about a deterrence. Can Ukraine create a sufficient deterrent against future aggression, against future attack, against future invasion? Because every country in the world has a right to defend themselves, and no one can.
Well, is Russia one of those countries in the world that has the right to defend itself against Western aggression? Is that included in here? And why do we always completely forget about that part? Because the U.S. is involved, and the U.S. can do whatever it wants. And if you wish to bomb the Houthis, you don't need any permission from anybody, only because you're the United States. Well, if you're the Houthis, you're wishing somebody needed some permission. And I'm not for or against any of that stuff. I frankly don't know enough to get into it. But we have a good history of attacking where we want to attack, fighting where we want to fight, and we don't ever we just sell it as well. Geez, we're looking out for democracy. Well, why do we need to put all these people in Ukraine? Well, because we've created the illusion that Russia's going to attack. Well, how many times you got to punch them in the face before, we did expanded NATO. How many times after we said we wouldn't? How many punches in the face do you expect them to take? Especially when they say, all right, you punched me again, you little so-and-so, quit punching me in the face. But you ever punch me in the face from Ukraine, you're going to have problems. And so we create these problems, and then we blame someone else because they don't want them to we don't want to just fold up our tents and say, well, gee, sorry, our fault. Sorry, my fault. Crazy sauce. I don't like it. And I don't want to be too pro-Russian here. They've got their own guilt here too. But once again, nobody ever looks at it from that point of view. And all these morons running around claiming that Russia wants to take over the world are exactly that. They're morons. The Russians have any interest in taking over Europe. They had no interest in taking over Ukraine. And if Ukraine had honored the Minsk Accords, which were all just a lie, we wouldn't be where we are today. We wouldn't be there.
Dispute that. So that will most certainly have to be part of the conversation. But again, I don't think there isn't a peace to secure until you have a peace. But there's no way to have an enduring peace without the deterrence piece being a part of it.
Can I just follow up on that
Yes.
point? Because the joint statement talks about European partners being involved in the peace process, but that's only attributed to the Ukrainian delegation. There doesn't appear to be US support.
Well, what I think what it
line.
says in the statement is that they raised the need for the Europeans. But I've already said publicly, the Europeans have issued a series of sanctions against the Russian Federation. And I would imagine that in any negotiation, if we get there, hopefully, with the Russians, that they will raise these European the European sanctions that have been imposed upon them. So I think that the issue of European sanctions are going to be on the table, not to mention what happens with the frozen assets and the like. And so I think it's self-evident that for there to be a peace in Ukraine, at the end of that process, there's going to have to be some decision made by the Europeans about what they're going to do with these sanctions and so forth. And so that's why I think they have to be necessarily involved in this regard. Now, whether they're involved at the front end of it or at the back end of it, it'll have to play itself out. And then obviously there's also all sorts of security promises that European countries have made to Ukraine, that will also be, I imagine, a part of this conversation as we move forward. So we don't disagree with that statement. I think the statement just reflects that they raised it.
Would you back European peacekeepers in Ukraine, which is something Russia is categorically...
Well, we'll see. I mean, there's different ways to construct a deterrent on the ground that prevents another war from starting in the future. We're not going to go in with any sort of preconceived notion. The bottom line is it needs to be something that makes Ukraine feel as if they can deter and prevent a future invasion. How that looks and how that's put together, that's what we're going to be talking about. If we can get to that stage. Again, right now we're just trying to get to the stage where there's actual diplomacy happening. Here's what we'd like the world to look like in a few days. Neither side is shooting at each other. Not rockets, not missiles, not bullets, nothing. Not artillery. The shooting stops, the fighting stops, and the talking starts. That's what we want to see. What happens during that talking and how that evolves, I think we're going to have to be flexible and nimble and creative and patient and work hard at it and hopefully turn it into something that's concrete. You've covered, many of you have covered foreign policy for years. That's how these things happen, and they're not easy, and sometimes they're difficult to predict which way they're going to go in terms of the specifics of it. But we just want to get to that stage. That would be, for lack of a better term, a good problem to have to figure out how to negotiate a peace, because we're actually negotiating a peace while the shooting is stopped.
Is the mineral deal essentially the security guarantee that you guys envision? And then the second question is, President Trump appealed to a lot of Americans during his campaign on free speech arguments and not suppressing speech, especially from the government. But your revocation of the green card, to many, is seen as one of the most anti-speech actions a secretary could take with his powers. How do you respond?
That part. I forgot that part. We need to get past, and there's that was a waste of a time question there on these green cards and people. I don't really care. I mean, I do care, but I don't really give a crap about that, whether they're going to kick the kid out or not. We'll get back to it. I might have to skip around just a tiny bit, because that's only one video, but let's see where we go.
But once you get in, we're going to revoke it and kick you out. I don't know. Should I be? What do you know that I don't know?
They're unhappy. I don't know. You got the tariffs the last 12 hours. You've just seen this escalating trade war, not just with Canada, but with the exception of Japan.
Yeah, we don't care about that either. They were talking about Canada being involved in the negotiations to settle the war in Ukraine, and who really cares about that? The only ones that
decisions when it comes to trade policies that have led to the...
No, we don't care about the trade policies.
So many eyes on the ground, and there's also all sorts of...
We're going to skip the rest of that. In fact, he was speaking quite a bit about the nothing burger that has been offered to Vladimir Putin. And then we also heard that there were going to be discussions, and then, as we discussed last week, Putin and Lavrov and Lukashenko pretty much just ignored them, sent some minor dignitaries over to speak with them about this. There's an alleged phone call. The news came out here not too long ago. This morning, in fact, stated that Moscow is confirming the Putin-Trump phone call date. The U.S. president earlier announced he expects the conversation to take place on Tuesday. Well, I hope they can figure something out and to see what they can do, but you gotta bring something more to the table than what you're bringing, in my humble opinion. Now, you can listen to the same thing. I haven't heard the whole part of it, but Jeffrey Sachs had over the weekend or in the last 4 or 5 days, he had something where he was talking about the 30-day ceasefire, and the headline says, Jeffrey Sachs, the 30-day ceasefire won't happen. And it won't happen, in my opinion. I don't think it will happen. And they, 4 hours ago, CNN reported that Trump and Putin are going to hold a call. And there's quite a bit of headline stuff going on. There's allegedly the Ukrainians are running out of Kursk, the remaining people that are there. Guy said Russia has nearly cleared out 95% of Kursk. This was 2 hours ago. Guy who I listened to quite a bit, named, and it's too long of a cut to listen to, otherwise I would, the Kursk front line. And this guy is his name is Patrick Lancaster, and his article says Ukraine forced out of Russia, out of the Kursk region. He says they're done. Now that was 8 hours ago, and we shall see. Arestovich, the guy who's going to run for president of Ukraine, he had one that I didn't get to listen to at all. I only got to listen to the first 15-20 minutes of it. But he has said that Russia has achieved several of their primary goals so far, and he believes that a civil war is coming in Ukraine, so that they're going to be booting out the old Green Goblin, that'll be the end of his time, that they just need to get rid of him. And, I'm not sure what's going to happen with that, but we shall see. And what occurs, it'll be very interesting for sure. But once they have a ceasefire, who's going to sign it? Number one, is it going to be Zelensky? Does he have the power to sign it? Are they going to put the judges back in power in Ukraine that have been jailed and put on ankle bracelets because they're anti Zelensky? Are his political rivals going to have the charges against them removed or continued? What's the story there? How are we going to resolve those small issues, right? What's going to happen? There's too many things to just say, hey, we just need a ceasefire and that's that. And I feel like if the Trump team is just running around going ceasefire, 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 you wonder what they're offering behind closed doors. There was another article that just came out that now Zelensky is flipped, and Zelensky is saying he doesn't want a 30-day ceasefire unless he gets more money to seal the deal. Now, that was late last night that I read that one, that you have to you got to give us more money, you got to give us more arms, you got to give us more stuff, or we don't want a 30-day ceasefire either. Well, I don't think he's in any position to demand anything else. You know, it's it's not there. Oh, there was a very interesting story. Get this. So the Russians over the weekend were parading around an entire hangar, an aircraft hangar, huge place full of Western equipment in Kursk that was completely undamaged, nothing touched, nothing, and just left, just abandoned as the Ukrainians left. And so they're going to have their May Day parade is coming up. Their May Day is the Victory Day. This is going to be a huge one so my prediction, I'll give you here in a second. So the May 9th is the anniversary of the end of World War II. And this will be 80 years since 1945 of the Velika Отечественная война, the Great Patriotic War, the very patriotic war. And it's the end of that war that they celebrate on May 9th. So my bet, and I kind of said this in Russian, I did say it in Russian yesterday on my little program with the Russian, on the Russian side that I was talking about. And people were commenting there, the comments were coming across in Russian, that wouldn't that be just a fitting end? Because why? Because we're fighting fascism, we're fighting Nazism, we're fighting the Ukrainians killing Russians in the eastern Donbass, we're fighting the inability of Russians to speak their own language, have their own culture. I asked people for sure, because I talked to them. This is on a video conference, right, where I asked people questions, and these questions that I kept getting. And there was a lady who said, listen, I lived in Ukraine, and I left there to come to Russia when the war was beginning. She said, I was in the Donbass region, and I was in Donetsk. And so she was in Donetsk, and she said that the school books, and I'd love to find this out. And when I get to Russia this year, I'm going to find out. I'm going to try to find a couple of these if they exist. Because think about this. They said that the lady's words to me, and I printed them down somewhere, but I'm just pulling them off the top of my head right now because I don't have that with me right now. She said that the textbooks were changed after the Ukrainians came to power, that all the textbooks after the fall of the Soviet Union were that the West, especially in Western Ukraine, that the Western Ukrainians were teamed up with Germany to stop the aggression of the Russian regimes that want to take over all of Europe. That they teamed up. And I said, that was really in the school books? She said, yes. This is what they've been teaching children for 30 years. That the aggression wasn't Hitler aggression, it was Russian aggression. And that Hitler was stopping Russian aggression. And the Ukrainians teamed up with Russia. This is their nationalist structure. And I was like, man, that is something I truthfully have never heard before. I haven't done any research on it. All I know is that's what this lady said to me, that she was in the Donbass region, that the schools were full of this nonsense, and that they had, and the talk has been for at least the last 2-3 years, that Russia has been complaining that they have destroyed Russian culture, they've torn down Russian monuments, they've torn down a Russian victory. For May 9th, nobody can celebrate May 9th. You can't put flags out in your yard and say that, you had relatives. Everybody had relatives that died in this war defending against Hitler's Nazi Germany, and they cannot celebrate it. And it's these things that the Russians are fighting. They believe it's an existentialist threat to Russia as a culture, as a people. And how can you blame them if these things are true? And Jeffrey Sachs believes this. When you listen to him, He says, and I don't get to listen to him all that often. In fact, I can remember who it was that told me I should follow him, and I remembered him from years earlier when I was actually in Washington, D.C., when we were talking, and he had appeared at a couple of things that I was involved in, or his name came up in a few things that I was involved in training-wise and things like that. But he says very much similar things, and that guy knows twice as much as I do. That that's one smart mofo. he's a smart dude, and he's been actually in the business on the ground with the leaders, worked with Gorbachev, worked with Yeltsin, worked with his powers in trying to resolve all these things forever, and nobody ever listened to him. Nobody. And nobody listens to him. He goes. He was. If you can watch, and he had how many weeks ago? This was maybe 6 weeks ago. He appeared at the in front of the Europe Security Council, or I forget what it is. What is it, OSCE or something like that? That he gave. He appeared and he gave like an hour and a half long lecture. If you haven't listened to that, you might want to. In fact, maybe one day this week I won't show up and I'll just have JR play that so that you can listen to it. Or maybe after my show I'll turn it on or something and say, here's his speech that he gave. Find the entire speech, because there's a lot of people that steal little snippets of it. You need to find the whole speech and what he says. And the second one should be, if you haven't listened to Lavrov's speech, you probably should. Lavrov's speech from last week with the three social media people. One of them's Judge Napolitano, and the other one is some young kid. But it was done in English. And if you want to listen to what the Russians say, you don't need me to paraphrase it for you. You can listen to those, but I've listened to all those, and I think they are very useful for us to listen to. If you truly believe that our government is nothing but a bunch of liars, like for the most part, I believe. I think they're good actors, but I question everything, as used to be the name of my radio show with JR years ago on the old KRMS. I still question everything, always have questioned everything. I think they're all a bunch of liars. And it's not in their interests to tell us the truth. It's not in their own personal interests. How are they going to get rich telling us the truth? I think, on a bit of a side note, we're going to see in the next 2-3 months, much faster if it ends up to be Trump's war in Ukraine more than it was Biden's war in Ukraine. If Trump can't keep pointing to Biden's war in Ukraine, strategically he's making a big mistake. If he comes out with some kind of as Rubio kind of was trying to say in this speech that he was given, or this press conference he was given, was, well, we'll see what we'll do about that then. We'll have more serious things. Because, oh boy, what are you going to do? Put more sanctions on them? What are you going to do? Unless you're threatening to do something militarily, what are you going to do? And what are you going to allow? Are you going to poke the bear some more? Or are you going to try to back that bear further into a corner, you think? And instead of Ukraine doing it, is the U.S. going to do it? Is that what's going to happen? Are we going to allow idiots like Starmer? Did you hear? He's sending in British fighters. He's sending in the British Army and Marines. They're going. And they're going to be on the ground in Ukraine. What kind of foolishness is that? You think they're going to make any difference? I don't think so. Ladles and jelly spoons. I think it's not gonna happen. So, at any rate, I think the more this war becomes Trump's war, the closer it gets to something none of us want. The smart move, Mr. Trump, if you're listening to damn radio today. The smart move is to stop providing weapons and intelligence to Ukraine. And on that note, we shall take a call. Hello, caller. Are you on? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I certainly can. What may I do for you?
Well, I'm just curious. Do you think it's about time we ditch Ukraine and just kick them to the curb as the ragged old whore they are?
Well, I haven't been that blunt about it. Just perhaps your way is a little more, I don't know, acceptable. I like your way. I think it's time to end with them, and I think Trump saying that he was no longer going to provide arms and was not going to provide military intelligence assets to Ukraine 2 weeks ago was great, and then giving them back in this Rubio nonsensical whatever it was, if you want to call it a negotiation in Jeddah, was ridiculous. And now giving that back was a bad mistake, and
I agree.
It turns it into, and anything more he gives is an even larger mistake, and is going to turn this into Trump's war, not Joe Biden's.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you, Sam. I think this is what I think. And I've got millennials and post millennials, whatever Gen Z or whatever they are now, but people in my life, and they don't want to fight. They don't want to fight. They want to have fun. They want to have kids. They want to, play music. They want to do fashion shows. They don't want to F with fighting wars around the world. So, I'm just saying, if I were in some bigger shoes, I'd be saying, look, whoever wants to fight wars, you're on your own. We're not going to help you, including Israel, and the whole thing over there with Iran starting to blow up and the Houthis and all that. If you guys want to fight, if you Jews and Arabs want to fight, and if you Russians, they're all Russians. The Ukrainians aren't just Ukraine. They're Russians, by nature. Hell, didn't Russia start in Kiev?
Yeah, it was Kievskaya Rus, Kievian Rus, and the Ukrainians like to say that points to how Ukraine has been around forever. But the about 400 years ago, they changed the capital from Kiev to Moscow, and that's
St.
when they.
Petersburg.
Well, Petersburg was part of it too. After that, but they went to Moscow before that, and.
Didn't Moscow used to be called something before Moscow? Wasn't it like St. Petersburg or Leningrad or something?
St. Petersburg is up on the ocean, and Moscow is on the on a river, a large river, and no, they're not the same city, but it was Moscow, yeah.
Yeah, I'd really like to visit there someday. And the reason I call repeatedly, Sam, is I don't know whatever connections you may or may not have, but I think the word should be let's not fight. Russia is our friend, like in that movie Finding Nemo. Fish are our friends.
I keep saying that too, and every time I talk, it's pretty funny because quite a bit of people respond. I have 30% of my listeners when I speak Russian on my little Russian program, only 30% of them are from Russia, and 12%, something like that, are from Ukraine that listen to me. And I say the same sort of things that I say here. I just say them in Russian, and I always point out, as I look, from my point of view, I want people to know that me and a lot of people like me, that I am not alone, that there are many, many people like me, that to us, Russia is not an enemy. And maybe our governments fight against each other, but I truly would love to create and by the way, that guy that used to work in the same agency I did, Scott Ritter, I suppose you've heard the name.
Yeah, I've heard of Scott Ritter.
But Scott Ritter worked in the same agency that I did, and he was an officer. He was an inspector, where I was more of I was an interpreter and an escort on the U.S. side. He was an inspector that went to Russia far more. He was in Russia for a long time. And me, I only got trips, but he was there constantly. And he, before he got arrested, well, not arrested, before he got pulled off the airplane in New York by the Homeland Security, before they pulled him off the plane, he was going over to speak at a World Economic Forum in St. Petersburg or Moscow, don't remember which, and he had been in the process of coming up with a joint Russian-American friendship organization, something like that.
How about that?
And where is
And
it now? Well,
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
they shot him down. And
Yeah,
then
they
all
shut
this
him down. They
idiot-
arrested him. They searched his house. They took his passport. He can't travel. It's like it's nonsense, and all because he has an alternative point of view, and he wants to make. And he was somebody they'll keep an eye on because he everybody knows him. You know what I mean? And
Well,
he would go over there, and people would show up to his speeches over there. 10,000 people would show up. He could fill a stadium, right? And but he, was in Iraq and did some of the arms control stuff, or maybe Middle East somewhere. Maybe it wasn't Iraq, but it's guys like that the government just comes and tears them down. And
right, and
and
not only do they have an alternative point of view, but their point of view is peace. That's the war. These oligarchs, whoever, point the finger, we say they. Who the hell knows who they are? Really, there's little leftist creeps, sneaking around behind the scenes and sabotaging like these judges and crap. There's just little cells like that. But then there's somebody funding all that, man, and they're funding war, and they've been funding war since the early 1900s. They fund both sides of the war. They are the ones that need to be tried and are arrested, tried, and prosecuted. They're the ones, not us poor little people that I had to spend the afternoon with my daughter in the DMV, because she negligently, and I told her, you got to have your papers in place or you're going to get in trouble. So she let it go for 2 years. So I spent the entire afternoon up there, paid her way out of her, last 2 years, which is fine. I'm just saying, for a sticker, for a tiny little sticker to put on her license plate. And there's these people that are billions and trillions of dollars, and we're in on it, man. Anybody invested in the stock market or anything like that, we're all in on it. We're willing participants in the cell phones, and I'm one, and I'm a hypocrite. But I'm just saying that, man, oh man, the peaceful people are the ones that get the biggest persecution, like Jesus. For heaven's sakes, I'm just saying that peace is our best option, man. And I am so tired of politics, so tired of it. We should just be
Yep.
peaceful
I wish,
people.
I hope they can get some ceasefire, but getting a ceasefire shouldn't be the goal. Ending the war should be the goal. And in order to
Peace.
end the war, you have to listen to what Russia has been saying. Finally, you have to listen, because they've been saying the same effing thing since at least 2007, and nobody has listened to a word of it. They just put
Not a
them
word.
off to the side. We don't have to listen to them. They're some third world country, and they can't do anything about it. Well, I got news for
third
you.
world
They
country that's
can,
trying
and
to,
they have.
to take over the world. Yeah. So they're accused. We've been fighting this war against communism for how long? I don't know, since the 40s or 50s, since World War II, something. and it's never been about communism, man. It's always been about keeping the wars going. And it's all because of the banks and all these influencers, and there's people out there that may or may not be listening to this, Sam, but they think they're in on it. They think they're part of the big group that's going to, control the world and have their pencil pushing bank jobs. Well, I'm telling you what, people, your days are numbered. As an administrative group of pencil pushers that continue to invest in and promote war, that's gone. I know I got kids of just the ripe age, and they are so fed up with it. They get so frustrated, what tax day is coming. My son's a musician. He gets paid on 1099s. They're going to tell him to send in a check for $10,000, 30%. And I'm like, man, dude, the only way we're going to handle this is peacefully and politically. Go and vote, talk to your friends about stuff, get everybody on a similar sheet of music, so to speak, and let's win this peacefully and politically. We do not need to conscript young people to a meat grinder, man. That's ridiculous. And Europe is
Well, I
openly
don't think
discussing that.
ours will I don't think the Americans will put up with that right now. Let me
Oh
ask
no,
you
they won't.
something. Do you think that it's possible to change the direction that we're in? Because I'm not so positive. Now, when I talk to JR about it, he says, and I talk to a couple other people, and most people that I know that are more on the Republican side, they're pretty positive. Now, me, I have some very, very serious doubts because uh, the the same thing just goes round and around and around in circles. I can't tell you the first time on my Question Everything radio program from years ago when JR and I were on there in
Was that
like
on Saturdays?
2008 when we were talking about it, and was talking about, and I've said it several times since then, but talking about the pendulum swinging back and forth. The pendulum just seems to keep swinging further and further, and so it gets more extreme on one side and then more extreme on the other. So the next step, now we have Trump turn it all around. The next step is it gets even crazier. We just came off a super crazy Democratic run that was just ridiculous for anybody that is a reasonably good historian. But now, if we go completely the other direction, this is the trouble with two parties, in my opinion. And we might be a little more stable if we had a third party and there had to be a coalition of some sort. Or you had, because 80%, 60% of us are probably in the middle of that road. We got the loonies, the Democrats on the far left. We got the loonies, the Republicans on the far right. And the rest of us, normal people, are in the middle. And so maybe a third party, it's about freaking time,
Dude,
And I don't know. I don't know. But are you positive about what you think, or do you think, like me, take that a little bit with a grain of salt and go, yeah, well, here we are for now,
Well,
but I fear for what's going to happen for our kids in 20 years.
I'm very positive. And there's two primary reasons. And the first one is I think our all Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, the Son of God, and goodness, and decency. That's number one. Number two, I think the quality of the young people I know in my life right now, my 30-something children, are imbued with a special type of knowledge because the information is out there for us to garner, man. All we have to do is push a couple of buttons on our device and all information, good, bad, and different. If we manage to keep that without being censored like your old buddies at KRMS do, and they spew ridiculous leftist mainstream media drivel, that's just a diatribe. I'm going to drop that right now.
I'm being blocked in Russia. And not in Russia. I'm being blocked by YouTube. And
right, that's a shame. That's what they're afraid of. They're afraid of knowledge. When I mean the leftist control freak fools, they are afraid of knowledge to the common people. Who besides the Democrats in the United States are opposed to peace and prosperity? Who is? Nobody. I'll tell you what, the poor serfs in China, they would rather have peace and freedom and prosperity than what they're experiencing. And I'm going to say Russia, however communist it is, they have a lot of latitude over there to enjoy their life based on their their I don't know, perspective, I guess. They can
Well,
choose to be in on it
I tell you what,
or choose not.
you don't screw with the government over there, but as long as
Right,
you just work within the rules that you know they exist, then
right.
you can do whatever you want. And
And Sam,
the
we do that
opportunities over
right here.
there are equal to the opportunities over here.
I
And
was forced to. I wasn't forced, but we sat in the DMV for 3 hours today, at least, maybe 3.5, to get a sticker. And if that's not communist, I don't know what is, bro. I've
well,
woke up with enough of your
that is what you call government being in a hurry.
overreach.
Because if you got out in 2 hours, boy, that's a record. You've done really well. And so
All right.
that's government activity. That's good stuff.
All right. I don't, well, I'll tell you, it all came out okay, and that's fine and dandy. But my point is this: we had to do that for a sticker, man, a sticker, because of
Well,
an
listen,
administrative
just like
issue.
people say, I don't, I get paid by the hour. That ain't so in the government. You get paid whether you do something or you don't. That is why
Right,
communism collapsed in Russia,
right, right.
because you're going to get paid whether you produce or not. So
Yeah.
why produce? That's the
And thank
trouble
goodness
with
for
the
Doge.
government.
Thank goodness for Doge. A program actually began under Obama, and his Doge czar was Joe effing Biden. You can't make this stuff up, Sam. It's so much fun to listen to you and JR and talk, intelligently and openly. And sometimes I get a little bit wound up and use foul language, but
Yeah,
it's
I
so
do too.
good to
Well, but
to to.
the things that and here's the best thing that we have going for us. I don't care if you agree with me or you disagree. The fact is, what I say, nobody is pumping down my throat to say this is what you have to provide the people. I have
Right,
complete control over
your
what I
choice.
say or do not say, and JR wouldn't stop me from saying what I want. No. And if I'm wrong, call me, tell me
Yeah,
I'm
own it,
wrong.
own it.
Tell
Well, I
me
think my,
perhaps you should think about this. Perhaps you should look up this, and I don't have any problem admitting I'm wrong. I was wrong once or twice before. And
I think peace and prosperity are the answer. I really do. I think we just push for peace and prosperity, and maybe use that as a little what do you call that? An alliteration. Push for peace and prosperity. And I think most people, most humans in the world, that the globalists and the leftists hate, they want to eradicate depopulationists. That's what we're fighting against right now. Good and evil. But good people, they want peace, and prosperity. And bad people want to eliminate good people. So thank you for sharing your time with me, Sam. I really appreciate it.
well, I'm glad you called in. Thanks for calling, and I hope you have a
I'll,
very nice day.
I'll be checking in with you in the future, brother. Thank you.
All right, sir. And there he goes. And I wanted to point out a couple of things that interesting, because after most of my, and recently I've been getting, I don't know what, trolled, I guess would be a better word, by the same guy that trolls everybody. And he sends me things and says, well, you're wrong. And after the show, I'll get like an email or I'll get a text from him tell me how I'm wrong. And if he was ever decent about the way he talked or spoke about, perhaps maybe starting with some of the things that I was talking about on the show, actually, to perhaps we could have a reasonably good conversation. I don't know the gentleman who just called in on a personal level. I know that he has called in before, and I've spoken to him several times, and I enjoy talking with him, but I'm not rude to him, and he's not rude to me. and we share ideas that perhaps we'll agree upon and perhaps not. But he doesn't just call up and go, "You suck, you're wrong." It's it's there's a way to approach a discussion, even a disagreement. And I've always been good at accepting other people's points of view, accepting criticism, accepting other ways to do things. And I hope that people take what I say in that line of thought, because I don't care what you believe. That doesn't bother me in the slightest if you agree with me or you don't. But don't try to pump crap, sunshine where it don't belong. Don't be pumping sunshine in deep, deep crevices, and because nobody needs it there, and it's just objectionable to me to not at least put some thought into the other ways of thinking. Now, peace and prosperity, like the esteemed caller was just talking about, would be great. And the quickest way, the very fastest way, it's going to sound harsh, ladles and jelly spoons, but the quickest way to peace in Ukraine is to dump them. Stop funding a war that can never be won by the Ukrainians unless you commit something far more. And unfortunately, Trump did the right thing at first, but now he's getting lured back in. He's getting lured back in by the Europeans, who all say, well, we're going anyway. No, you're not. It'll take you 3 years to come up with enough weapons and arms, unless you want to go in nuclear power. Good luck with that. Let's end the world because you're idiots. That's completely foolish. The Europeans are never going to go in there against Russia on behalf of Ukraine unless they're backed by the United States. The smartest thing that the old Trump monster did was cut off Ukraine, cut off the intelligence assets, cut off the supplies. If you cut off the intelligence assets and you cut off the supplies and you hadn't given them back just because Ukraine says, oh, gee, we'll accept a 30-day ceasefire, because they knew damn well that Russia wouldn't, not on the terms that they're offering, which are, let's have a 30-day ceasefire and everybody get together, sing Kumbaya, and suddenly we can claim it's all over and put some European peacekeepers in there. Why don't we do that? There's a good plan. Not. It's a terrible plan. And if you think that's a good plan, you need to go have your head examined, swiftly and get it checked out. And listening to the Rubio, he seems a little more despondent. He seems, because they know that Russia is not going to accept a 30-day peace proposal. How do they know? Because they really aren't idiots. And if the best they could get in Jeddah was what they got, then they really are subpar negotiators, and they weren't doing it from a position of strength like they should have been. The fact that they gave Ukraine back this U.S. intelligence assets and the more equipment, more arms, and continued with the supplying of Ukraine continues the possibility, slight however it may be, the slight possibility that this war will just continue to drag on. And if we continue to fund it, it'll be the war of attrition on the front lines in the eastern part of Ukraine until Russia achieves its goals. And its goals, nobody's paid any attention to so far. And nobody mentioned even in the State Department briefs that they put out. And so I think it is something that people need to examine a little more carefully. Mr. Rubio, the people that you should be listening to, and Donald Trump, the people that you should be listening to are people like Scott Ritter, are people like Jeffrey Sachs, are people like me, for God's sake, and I'm nobody. But it's pretty sad if I happen to know or have a better plan than the one that you have been putting into place. The special envoy, Steve Witkoff, in fact, and we're supposed to meet and discuss these deals, and they kind of blew him off when he was in Moscow last week. Allegedly, there's a conversation to be had on the telephone with Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. It says it's tomorrow. You know, I started reading that article to you. I'm going to continue on with it because Peskov is the one of the Kremlin spokespersons. His name is Dmitry Peskov, and he confirmed an early announcement made by Trump, who told reporters while he was aboard Air Force One on Sunday that he plans to speak with Putin on Tuesday to discuss the prospects of a peace agreement in the Ukraine conflict. So, if he and Putin can resolve something, and Putin can say, I want this, and I want this, and Trump can then turn around and force that down Ukraine's throat, which I think he needs to do, then the war's over. The Russia's already won anyway. You know, that's done. Commenting on the details of the upcoming phone call, Trump suggested that it will focus on territorial realities in Ukraine and Kiev's claims to now Russian territory, as well as power plants endangered by the conflict. So I don't know if you listened to me I think it was Friday, but sometimes I get a little bit confused because there was I do it in Russian too, and I may have spoken to it only on the Russian channel. So the Zaporizhia power plant, which is inactive, the Ukrainians are putting out information that's saying, and they're talking to the International Atomic Energy Agency, that is on site there, overlooking the plant, and that plant, it could be brought back up and into power, but it's not supplying power right now, and it could be, and the Russians say that it could be, and the Ukrainians are saying they want that power plant back, and it cannot be restarted without Ukraine. Russia's going, I don't know what you're talking about. We could restart it up. We could restart it up by May. And we can start that thing back up. So who knows? But they want to talk about these power plants, and Ukraine's probably jockeying for position to try to get their power plant back, but they've lost that territory. Well, they really want that back. So Peskov didn't confirm or deny what Trump had said. He said, we never do that. We don't jump the gun. Preparations for the conversation are ongoing, but as we see it, discussions between two heads of state should not be preemptively disclosed, said the spokesman. Well, America's pretty big at that. We do that all the time because we want the other side to know what we're coming at. So Trump's saying that we're going to talk about power plants and we're going to talk about territorial concessions of means that he's trying to guide the speaking. He's pre-positioning himself for where he plans to be. Commenting on the upcoming call, Steve Witkoff, U.S. Special Envoy, earlier stated that Trump and Putin were expected to discuss the U.S. proposed ceasefire in Ukraine. Witkoff met with Putin, he didn't, in Moscow last week to present him with the details of the potential 30-day truce. He met with his aides, which Kiev agreed to at the talks in Saudi Arabia early last week. While details of the meeting would have not been disclosed, Witkoff described it as positive. The Russian president said last week he welcomed the ceasefire in principle, but insisted that certain issues need to be addressed before he could agree to it, and that he won't agree to it if they are not addressed. The German media is told to conceal Nazi symbols in Ukraine. Berlin has forbidden journalists from showing banned images in their coverage, according to Russian intelligence. The German government has ordered national media outlets not to show Nazi symbols in Ukraine, according to the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service. Journalists have been warned that they may face legal repercussions for broadcasting any such imagery, said the agency Monday, today. The guidelines advise reporters to politely ask Ukrainian soldiers displaying swastikas or other Nazi-associated symbols, SS symbols, to remove the agitation elements and avoid unwelcome actions such as performing the Nazi salute, according to the SVR. The agency emphasized that the prevalence of Nazi iconography and ideology in contemporary Ukraine is well documented. That's true. The recommendation to exclude evidence from broadcasts suggests an effort to mislead the German public about the situation, claims Russia. While the Russian report did not specify when the document was issued or which branch of government was responsible, it did state that compliance by news outlet reflects a lack of independence. Under the German Criminal Code, public display of symbols associated with the Third Reich is generally prohibited except for educational, scientific, journalistic, or artistic purposes. According to Moscow, modern Ukrainian nationalism is shaped by historical collaboration with Nazi Germany during World War II. Figures such as Stepan Bandera, who they truly honor in Ukraine, who sought to establish a Ukrainian national state under German patronage, are celebrated as national heroes. Western media and officials have minimized the use of Nazi symbols by Ukrainian soldiers, framing it as a historical quirk rather than a sign of neo-Nazi affiliation, and dismissing any contrary claim as what? Russian propaganda and disinformation, right? Russia contends that it has amassed substantial evidence of Ukrainian atrocities driven by the notion of national supremacy, justifying its designation of the Kiev regime as a neo-Nazi regime. Now, somewhere in the middle is the truth there, by the way, but there are Ukrainian soldiers wearing swastikas and SS symbols all over Ukraine, and those Azov brigades were very much Bandera supporters, very much into the symbols. Read more. Elite U.S. university rehabilitates Ukrainian neo-Nazis. How about this? Now, I wonder if you hear this in America, right? This will be the last one for today. So, the Azov Brigade has been removed from Stanford's list of extremists. Okay, so they're no longer extremists, according to Stanford. A Stanford University research group has removed the Azov Brigade, an avowed neo-Nazi Ukrainian military unit, from its list of extremist organizations. Officials in Kiev reportedly pressured the university to have the battalion, long accused of war crimes and other atrocities, removed from their database. Funded by the Pentagon and the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Stanford's Mapping Militants Project, MMP, tracks membership, activity, and relationships of more than 100 so-called extremist organizations, from the Irish Republican Army and the Taliban to the Oath Keepers militia and QAnon movements in the U.S. So we're all being, I'm not a member either of those, but we're being tracked too. But no, you can't track Ukrainian Nazis. That's not allowed. Until May, the list included the Azov Brigade, the notorious neo-Nazi Ukrainian militia that was absorbed into the country's military in 2015, and the wider Azov movement associated with the unit. An archived version of the group's profile described how it was founded as a militia by Kharkov-based white nationalists Andrei Bielitsky in 2014 and drew members from a collection of nationalist and extreme right groups in Ukraine which promote a neo-Nazi ideology and fought on Kyiv's side against pro-Russian forces in the Donbass region that same year, killing willy-nilly, by the way. The MMP noted the Azov's use of neo-Nazi iconography on the battlefield, including the Wolfsangel symbol, which was used by several German divisions in World War II, including the 2nd SS Panzer Division. The removal of the Azov Brigade from the MMP was spotted last week by independent journalists Sam Karlin and Lane Carlos, who drew attention to a social media post by Ukrainian ambassador to the U.S., Oksana Makarova, earlier this month, in which she thanked Stanford for the move. Makarova described the removal as a response to her staff constantly drawing attention to Russian propaganda and disinformation, suggesting that they lobbied the university to have the page taken down. Stanford's removal of the Azov Brigade profile came about a month before the U.S. State Department lifted its long-standing ban on arms deliveries to that unit. The agency said that it had conducted a thorough review and found that the Azov Brigade was not implicated in any human rights violations. Then they didn't do a very thorough review, because all over Telegram are some extremely horrifying videos of what this Azov Brigade did to people. Women, children, men, soldiers, captured, prisoners. Unbelievable. And that is one of Russia's biggest complaints, because the Azovs were also involved in what's gone on up in the Kursk region, and they want to. There was an ad a couple of weeks ago where they captured a whole bunch of them and took their phones, and these are the people that they want to charge with war crimes, because they have a habit of taking videos of all the people they torture and rape and kill. And so that's what the Russians are putting out. Call it disinformation if you want, but it's certainly something that ought to be looked into. As the MMP is often cited in reports by the U.S. government, the continued inclusion of the Azov Brigade in the list would have contradicted the State Department's conclusion that we need to be able to give them weapons. Prior to its removal, the brigade's page mentioned that Azov members had been involved in attacks on Roma camps and LGBTQ activists and demonstrations against the construction of a mosque in Lvov. Between 2014 and 2022, the group recruited an unknown number of fighters from the U.S., the MMP stated. Russia has condemned the State Department's decision to arm the Azov Brigade. This sudden change of stance by Washington proves that U.S. officials would stoop to anything in their attempts to suppress Russia, using the Ukrainian people as a tool. They are even fine with flirting with neo-Nazis, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told reporters earlier this month. And there's one more. I hope that this video would be here, because here is a picture of Boris Johnson holding a Ukrainian neo-Nazi banner from the Azov Brigade. So here he is. The ex-UK Prime Minister touted the Azov Brigade as heroes, despite it reports that committed numerous war crimes. And there's a picture of him holding it up, and this Azov Brigade is constantly accused of these things. Former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson joined fighters from Ukraine's notorious neo-Nazi Azov unit to pose for a photo while holding a banner bearing a symbol associated with the Third Reich's SS. How do you like that? Boris Johnson's a moron, but there he is, holding the banner proudly with the swastika and the SS Brigade. The controversy erupted on Wednesday when several members of the Azov Brigade, widely known for neo-Nazi ideology and outlawed in Russia, were greeted by British MPs as part of a roundtable discussion on the return of the unit's prisoners of war in the UK Parliament. Founded as a neo-Nazi militia in 2014, Azov was a key participant in the fighting in Donbass prior to the outbreak of full-blown hostilities in 2022. During this time, it was accused by the UN and several human rights organizations of engaging in torture, rape, and looting. It was eventually integrated into Ukraine's National Guard and in 23 was expanded to a brigade. The event was chaired by MP Victoria Prentice, Attorney General of England and Wales. Johnson also met with the Azov Brigade fighters, touting them as heroes, urging the West to give Kiev more weapons and the authority to carry out strikes outside their own borders, including on Russian soil. We rely wholly on such heroes as these people who are here tonight with us from the Azov Brigade, he said. Unbelievable. That guy's an idiot. And, well, you can believe what you want about the Azovs, but it's well documented what they have done and what they wish to continue to do and how they react to outsiders and to Russians. It is not good. Well, I believe that's as far as we shall go this here evening. I very much appreciate everyone for joining in and chatting with us and listening to the program. I am very glad that you are here and that you continue to listen to Damn Radio. Please continue to do so as often as possible because we like it. If you like to listen to me in Russian, or if you would like to with subtitles, you can do so at Samuel Trapp on YouTube. You can listen to my my English-speaking podcasts at internationalflavor.com. And they're all there, and sometimes there's some extra ones that aren't always here. And I have an International Flavor Russian also. International Flavor Russian at podbean.com, or .podbean.com. Thank you very much. I hope you all have a very nice evening. See you tomorrow.